What's going on, everyone? Tony Ivanov here, lead trader and founder of TradeBuddy, and today I want to talk about penny stock ASNS. Now, this is a stock that really no one expected to go 300+% this morning. I mean, this morning it had a dip down, it looked very weak, and then all of a sudden volume came into it and shorts just got squeezed. So this went from around $1.30 up to a high of $4.50 intraday. Now, I'm not saying that you would make that same trade. That's, best case scenario. But with that type of volatility, I mean, there's lots of money to be made. There's a ton of 10% swings back and forth and some very obvious entries based on previous resistance. So I just want to talk about ASNS. I want to talk about all the factors that contributed into its spike, and hopefully that once you guys watch this video, you can pick up on these tips and you could potentially identify the next 300% runner. So with that being said, we're going to get right into my screen share and break it all down for you. Alrighty, so here we are on my screen share. Now, until I go any further, if you have any questions on exactly what brokers I use and what scanners I use, I have an FAQ in the description below, so you can answer all your questions there. So we're just going to get right into ASNS because there's a lot of information to pack into this video. Starting off, ASNS, how do we find this stock? Well, ASNS was a pre-market gapper. It had volume in the pre-market, and this just popped up on my equity feed scanner and on my Trade Ideas low float stocks scanner. So that's how I found ASNS. And if we go into the news, you can see that this column right here says news. If we just click on that, you can see that in the morning it said that they agreed to a merger with another company. So we'll just open it up real quick, take a quick look at the news. So the merger is expected to create a NASDAQ listed late stage biopharm, a company that is focused on rare diseases and cancer. So I'm not going to go too deep into this because it's not really that important. There's a lot of other stuff that is a lot more important. But if you want to read into this news, it's available here. You can pause the video, or you can just look on Yahoo Finance or on your equity feed if you have that trial program. So ASNS, some things I really want to note is that first of all, look at the percent institutional owns. That's over 77.5%. That's very important because what does that mean? Well, if the float is only 5.17 million, institutions, like large hedge funds and banker traders, they own a majority of that float. So they can control the supply. They can really influence how this stock can run. And that's very important. So keep that in mind. Usually when we have these massive runners, they, not always, but they usually have some sort of low float and high percent institutional owned combination. That combined with also a good news catalyst. But you can see here, ASNS in the morning, it didn't really look too strong. In pre-market, it had a nice gap up, but then had obvious resistance at this 164 line. And at the market open, it got stuffed really hard. It tried to break out, but then it got stuffed under 164, so it just looked very weak. And I frankly stopped watching it because there were other stocks to watch like ANY. Real quick, we're going to look at the levels of support and resistance, and you can see that if we switch over to the line chart, that's how I got that 164 line. So if you ever have trouble marking out your levels of support and resistance, if you don't know how to read candles too perfectly, all you gotta do is use your charting software and switch over to a line chart, and that really just flattens out and smoothens the overall price action, and you can see the average resistance was at around 164-ish. And in pre-market, the support was 136, and it broke down below that by about 6 cents. Now next I want to get into the daily chart, because frankly ASNS did not look like a good stock to me this morning. I was doing my pre-market live stream, and I was looking at ASNS, and I frankly did not look at the percent institutional owned, and I just focused way too much on the daily chart, and it just looked like it was so beat down. I mean, like, whenever it spiked, it failed terribly. It doesn't really have any strong green days, and it just looked like a bad chart. And if we look at, once again, the line chart, well, not the line chart, the daily chart, you can see right here on November 9th, that's the same resistance, 164. So usually these levels of resistance and support, they correlate with chart history, and that's one way you could have also found that level of resistance. But also we can switch over to the line chart, and you can see that's how I got my other lines. Like this 211 line was from here, 231 was from this day on the 31st of August, and also the 275 line around there. And that's just a really good way to, you know, identify levels of support and resistance. You can see here on this day, on October 5th, 275 was very clear resistance on that day. So now we have that out of the way. So now as far as the actual run goes, how could we have played ASNS? How could we have profited from this? Well, there's honestly a few different ways you could have done it, and it just depends on what your trading style is, right? So if we look at my Trade Ideas scanner this morning, you can see that at right when this started breaking out over the high of day, it popped up on the scanner. So you can see here at half an hour after market open, it started breaking out, hit 165, 167, and one of the best places that you could have bought is just a breakout over pre-market high, because if we look at this price action, you can see that it was being beat down under VWAP, but then it started making higher lows, and then those higher lows turned into a break over VWAP, and then it reclaimed and held VWAP and then spiked further. So that right here, this area is very important because, one, look at the volume. This is very bullish volume compared to the morning. I mean, look at this volume candle right here at 10:06 a.m. 190,000 shares. That was more than what happened in the morning. So whenever you have large breakout volume over a break over, you know, like a large level of resistance like VWAP, that's a very bullish sign. And you can see it dipped back down, but then reclaimed that level, squeezed higher, and you could have either played the bounce off of VWAP at around 139, 140, or you could have waited until the break over 164, which was the pre-market high, because once you broke that, it squeezed up to 177 and then it halted for 5 minutes because of volatility. So once it halted, that's when we know we have to watch this stock. It's very volatile. It has big spreads. It's a low float, and it has a high percent owned by institutions. So that, you know, leads traders to believe that it could be very manipulated and it could squeeze and run very hard. So after the halt, it came out of the halt, hit a high of 211, and then it pulled back. And I was actually trying to buy this dip, but my highest order I had was at 178, and I just didn't get filled on this dip. Even though it hit a low of 178, it just hit it too fast and my order didn't get filled. I was just way too precise on it, and I missed out on a very nice bounce from 170s up to 211. But you can see that the main important thing is that whenever we have a halt like this, if you have a huge run up over it, usually a good level that you can dip by is the halt price. Now, it doesn't work all the time. Nothing with trading works all the time. It's all about probabilities. And that's why that, you know, you cannot wait until you have confirmation. You just have to leave your order at that dip. If it gets filled, great. Be ready to cut the loss if it does collapse. But if it does bounce, you have the very bottom dip buy, and you're going to have a very stress-free trade once it leaves that entry area. So 177 dip buy would have been one of the best ways to play this. I mean, you could have traded with a breakout over pre-market highs, but you'd be buying into a spike that's already gone up, you know, 15-20%, and you'd be buying a stock that's way overextended. If this didn't get halted here, it would have probably collapsed back down and tested VWAP and then ran higher. But the fact that it got halted, it changed the whole like mentality of traders, and it causes feeding frenzy of buying, and that's why that level acted as new support. And then after that, you can see that we had this nice triple top, flat top wedge along this 211 area, And once again, if you don't know how to read charts, you can just use a line chart, and you can see we have pretty clear resistance at that 210 line. So the break over 210 would have been also another very good area to buy. But of course, you never know what's going to happen in the future. And this time, it didn't really run that hard. It went from 210 up to 230. Yes, that's a nice 20% gain, or not 20%. That's a nice 20-cent gain, but it didn't really go that far. And that's really why when you're trading, you can't really like expect the best case every single time. You have to be able to be disciplined and lock in those partial profits when you're up 5, 6, 10%. If it does go higher, at least you're holding half your size in case it does go higher, but it's always a smart thing to lock in those partial profits when you've hit a nice 10% trade. Because you can see after it double topped at 231, it slammed back down under 212, and then it dipped along this VWAP area. So once again, another area that you could have bought a nice dip would have been using this VWAP hold. And if you look at the line chart, once again, you can see that in here, there was some support at 196 and $2. And I actually said in the chat, let me look it up real fast. I said in the chat that if you buy the, let me find it real fast. If you want to play ASNS on VWAP, the best area to buy would be 194. So let me just find that real quick. Right here. ASNS, it could bounce off of VWAP 194. Right there. And you can see that it, one, held above VWAP, and it, two, held this 198 $2 area. So that would have been a very good area that you could have dip bought. And I actually had a couple traders in my chat room who bought exactly 195. They had a couple more shares ready to buy at 194, but they, you know, had a bit more leeway room, and they got filled at the very bottom of that dip. And then you can see it rallied back up and actually broke out over 231. Now the thing is that when you have a great dip buy like this, you didn't really know how far it's going to go. But like I said, you just have to, you know, always base your trades on the chart. And you could have said, okay, if I have this dip buy at 195, I'm going to take partial profits at 211 because I know that that is a previous level of resistance. And then I'll take the rest off at 231 if it does hit that. And then, of course, you can base your stop using a trailing stop. Let's say that you take partial profits at 211, and then you say, okay, now if it breaks underneath $2, I will sell the rest and walk away with a nice profit. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that you can manage your risk. It really just depends on how your personality is. We have some traders in the chat room who can buy this dip and they can just hold for $1, $2 per share profit. I personally cannot do that. I'm way too timid of a trader. I like to take my profits when I have them and lock in my gains and walk away. So you just have to find out what works for you, because at the end of the day, everyone has a different personality, and you're not going to be able to trade like someone else exactly like they do. You have to find overall what works for you. So after that dip, I would not have wanted to play this breakout over 231 because it looked way too overextended, and it wasn't like a triple top breakout. It was just a big U-shaped break, and I didn't recommend to buy this breakout just because it didn't look like it was going to have an explosive, you know, power to it. It didn't trap any shorts under VWAP, and it just had low volume. It was dying off. So I said in the chat, I don't recommend buying this 231 breakout. Let it do its thing and wait for the next dip. And you can see next dip, it bounced VWAP, it bounced VWAP, and then right here, it broke under VWAP, held $2 though, and that's where it started to trap lots of shorts. Lots of shorts probably, you know, once it started breaking under 205 under VWAP, they were being way too aggressive, and they got squeezed out of it. So you can see it really quickly reclaimed VWAP, squeezed back up, hit a high of 250, and now let's just zoom out because the real action happens once it did this big breakout over 256, and then it bounced off of previous resistance. Now this is the thing I talk about very often in my videos, and it's one of the best strategies that I have found in my trading career, especially if you're a long trader, is that whenever you have these big massive breakouts midday and they hold previous resistance as support, that is a very good confirmation that this could go higher. Now you could either buy this breakout over 256 or just wait like until the retrace and then buy the dip once you see lots of buying volume and buying support at that previous resistance level. Previous resistance becomes new support, and that's a very awesome case as a long trader, because think about this. Let's say that you are a person who is going short on ASNS, risking 257, right? It squeezes over 257 and you don't want to cut the loss because you think it's going to go back down. It's a high of the 275s and you add more size in there, averaging up your position, but then it doesn't ever go back under your original share price. So you can never cover for a profit. And because you're too stubborn to cover the loss, if you don't get out at that point, it just squeezes higher and higher and higher. And eventually it just becomes too big of a loss and you have to cover those shares. Now imagine that happening to a million traders. And that's kind of what happened here on ASNS. And that's exactly what caused this massive short squeeze up to the 450 line. So number one, in my opinion, the best place to play ASNS as a long bias trader is to ignore all this action in the morning and just wait until the midday action, because as far as I've seen in the past 3 months, the best long-sided trades happen after the market open. We have seen so many short biased plays in the morning, and usually people who are going short, they don't want to short midday because there's not that much volume, and that's where longs can step in and really cause stocks to spike. So this breakout over here, 250, if we go back to our daily chart, we can see that 250 was an important line on the chart. If we look at our line chart, I believe it was an important line. Maybe not. It wasn't. It just happened to be a round psychological number, and it had a very nice, triple test breakout. Now, yeah, this area right here, it wasn't a perfect triple test, but both these times it tested 250, and then the third time it broke out, and you can see every single time it made higher lows, and that just is a very good case for a long biased breakout. And then of course the main thing is the fact that it hit the resistance at 277, which was on the chart, but then it bounced off at 250 and then squeezed through 277. And then once again, you can see once it broke over 277, previous resistance held as support. You could have also bought here this dip and this dip when there was obvious signs of support at that previous resistance line. That's the main thing I'm trying to get into your heads, is that if you want to dip buy long-sided stocks, really just try to look for areas where previous resistance acts as support, and you'll have the best profit potential and the lowest risk. And then after it bounced off 277 3 times, that's when it just started to really go parabolic and squeeze out so many shorts. Once it hit over $3, I would not want to touch this anymore, because at this point it was already up from 135 up to $3. That's a very big spike, and one of my rules is to not play stocks that are up over 100%, and this was up 121%. So if you miss this entire move, this entire morning, don't be the sucker who chases this stock, because yeah, it would have worked this time, but it's not going to work every time. And the times that it doesn't work, you're going to get burned, you're not going to be ready to sell, and it's just going to collapse on you completely, and you're going to be crushed and blow up your account. So never fall into FOMO. If you see a stock that's really just going massively parabolic when it's already up 120+%, just sit back and research the chart prior to that time and see how you could have played it. After this point, it just went really just a massive short squeeze, and all this action right here was basically just long traders who were just really chasing the stock, and people who were like going against the stock, they're recovering and, you know, squeezing it higher. Because remember, when you're a short trader, you sell first and then you buy when you cover. And if you're buying, that causes more buying pressure. It raises the price higher. And then when there's tens of thousands of people who are short who need to buy because they're underwater, it just perpetuates itself and it squeezes higher and higher and higher. And this is also a good reason to watch stocks that are owned a lot by institutions, because when institutions own a big supply, they can hold on to their supply, and people who are short, they don't have enough supply to cover back, and they have to buy higher and higher and higher, and that causes these massive short squeezes. So after that, it just kept squeezing, you know, like crazy. Eventually hit a high of this $0.50 mark. And one thing that I really want to point out is how to identify tops. Now, this is not going to work every single time, but when I was watching ASNS, one thing I noticed is that, you know, once we had this one test of just under the $0.50 mark, it pulled back. It did hold previous resistance, but like I said, it does not matter when the stock is up 250%. You don't want to, you know, try playing it there, because it's already, you know, moved so much. Once it bounced and then it retried breaking, it did break higher, but then it stopped at that 450 line. And one thing to note is that look at this volume. The volume on this candle was, you know, really big compared to the candles ahead of it and behind it. And that's kind of a really good case, like, to believe that, okay, there's a lot of people who are selling at that $0.50 mark, lots of people who are going short at that $0.50 mark. And that's when I said, okay, that looks like the top. There was lots of like stuffing action on the level 2, and it ended up being the top. So if you are a person who's going short, you need to be careful on stocks like this, because if you're not careful, you could really get blown up. So always wait until the stock is very overextended. And ideally, if you are a short trader, I would just avoid stocks overall that have a high percent institution owned, because it seems like these are the ones that squeeze the hardest, and these are the ones that shorts lose the most money on. So after that, it was on the backside of the move. I did not want to play any dips on it, and that's that. So that's my analysis on ASNS. Let me just go through my chat real quick, because I asked for some questions. Let me see. Yeah, I think that covered everything. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them down below. I'll be going through the comments of this video and answering all the questions as best as I can. If you guys saw value in this content, please hit the like button. If you want to be notified of future videos, hit the subscribe button, and then hit the bell next to that button to be notified via email. And yeah, hopefully I see you guys in the TradeBuddy chat room. We are running a Black Friday special, 20% off of all future payments, and also 20% off of our flagship Penny Stock Mastery course, which also includes lifetime access to the chat room. So very awesome values there. All the information is down below. Like I said, if you have any basic questions like what brokers I use, what scanners I use, and so forth, check the description, because there is a very nice FAQ there. All right, so hopefully this helped you guys out with your trading, and I'll see you guys in the next video.